been working on this homemade limiter for these cheap old grid tie inverters, and I have it working. Definitely not as well as I hoped it was going to work. I was hoping I could turn it on, the grid tie inverter, when it's seen a load on one of the main phases in the house. I was hoping to put the CT on the main phase of the house, one on L1, one on L2. And whenever one's seen draw from the grid of 10 amps, I wanted the inverter to kick in for that phase. And then I didn't want that inverter to shut off until it was down to a 2 amp draw from the grid. This way, the inverter wouldn't cycle, because on the mains on the house, you could easily turn on a ceiling fan, turn on the microwave, and all of a sudden it kicks in, and then you shut off your microwave kicks in and it goes just over 10 amps. Well, your inverter kicks in and all of a sudden it starts throwing out 7 amps. Well, all of a sudden it drops below that 10 amp draw because your inverter is now helping the grid, and then that would shut off your inverter, and then it would kick back on. So yeah, I was hoping that I could do this down to 2 amp. It's not working. I think the CT is getting confused as far as which way the current's flowing. I've been working with trying different setups here, locking diode, a bypass diode, and it still loses track. I don't know why, but as soon as it gets under 5 amp, either from the grid or to the grid, it gets confused and it just loses track, and it don't shut off the grid tie, which is bad in my situation because then I'm back feeding the grid and my smart meter becomes smart. I don't want that because I'm not supposed to be feeding into the grid. So I'll show you what I have set up over here, and I'll demonstrate what's happening. And if you guys have any ideas absolutely let me know. I'm at a loss here as far as why it's losing track on this. Um, so over here, the now this is in my shop. So here's the CT. This is a DC output CT. It outputs 0 to 10 volt DC. So right now I have it set on the mid range. There's 3 ranges. There's a high, medium, and low range. And so the mid range is a 0 to 20. So for every amp that goes through this CT, it puts out a half a volt. So 2 amps would equal 1 volt. 10 amps, 5 volts. So you get the idea. And like right now, you can see on the fluke here, we're doing 6.5 amps on here. And I have on just basically the shop lights. I don't have any solar going right now. And you can see that's at about 2.8. Now it's not perfect. I mean, in a perfect world, that should be 3.1 volts on there. But like I say, that CT is not perfect. So that's showing, the 6 amp draw. And, so then I have that fluke hooked up. And you can see that this is reading right. The CT isn't shooting out the exact voltage that it would be, and I wouldn't expect it on a cheap CT either. So what we have is this is actually powered up from my battery. Now it's 24 volt. Now this is actually the second one that I got. I had to send the first one back. I hooked it up, and I think they sent me, I ordered a 24 volt model. They come in a 12 and a 24. I think they must have accidentally sent me the 12 because when I hooked it up to the battery, it just went poof. So luckily, that's why I bought it from Amazon, because I know Amazon has a really good return policy. I just told them that, yeah, it's wrong, it's not working, and they sent it back. Or they had me send it, and they sent me out a new one. And this one works. So I do have a blocking diode in here. It seems to help this repeat better, especially when it gets around that voltage. So this is not a big deal in here. It just seemed to be a little bit better, and maybe it was all in my head. it just seemed to repeat better with the blocking diode in there. So I tried to bypass, and it didn't do any better than anything else. So when this sees 5 volts, it's going to kick on the normally open relay. It's going to kick on, and it's going to turn on this relay, which has the AC fed through it into this outlet over here. And yeah, I know this is kind of not up to code actually. And so that's going to turn on the grid on this outlet, and that will start powering up the inverters. So let's get started. Like I say, we're drawing a little over 3 amps right now. I'm sorry, 6 amps from the grid. My shop lights are on. So I want to get this up to 5 volts, which would be around 10 amps. So what I have over here is I have a couple different loads set up. Pardon the mess. I've been really working over here and just haven't gotten around to clean it up. So let's turn on this heater. Now, it hasn't kicked on yet. Yep, just kicked on. So let's come back over here. We see that's at 5.3 and the inverter's kicked on. So they're starting to power up. Now, this is dropping as the inverters come up. It's cloudy today, so I may have to throw on the other inverter. That's why I have that hooked up. So I was hoping for some sunshine, and it's not cooperating. So now we're saying it's drawing 10 amps, because yeah, that's dropping actually. Hold on, let's see if it goes back up. Yeah, it was a big old clouds going by, so we got a little break in them over here. So now you can see we're outputting, 500. There's still a couple small clouds going by, but so the heater's on, and that's saying we should be seeing a little over 8 amps from the grid. Well, okay, we just have another cloud going by. Okay, so I turned on another solar array up there, so you can see we have 725 watts, so about 7 amps coming in, and it says we're still pulling about 8 amps from the grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go shut that heater off, and we're up to 9 amps now. So with that, should kick that right out the minute I turn off that heater, because that's more than enough for my shop lights. So let's turn this off. So you can see we're putting out 10 amps, and it's still saying we're drawing 1.6 from the grid, and that's not possible, because all I have is my shop lights. See, and I turn off that, and that actually causes that to go up. So now we're actually reading reverse flow to the grid. So let me turn that off, because I'm actually backfeeding the grid 10 amps into there. I don't want to keep doing that. I don't know what I'll have running inside the house. But you can see that it's not functioning the way it should. Now let me set this up higher. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this at a higher, to turn off at a higher amps. I'm going to set it at 6 amps. So, and this thing actually sets really nice if you're looking for something for like a charge controller or something for a high and low point on a battery. This actually works really well. Setting it is easy. So right now it goes on, remember it's double, so it goes on at about 10 amps. I'm going to increase that a little bit. So that's 12. So 14 amps is when it's going to go on. Roughly right around there. In here, I'm going to set this at, went past it, my bad. So we're going to set this to 3, which would be about 6 amps. Okay, now let's repeat that. And so this shows my shop lights are on right around 6 amps. There's no solar running right now. Solar is off. So we're pulling 6 amps from the grid. So let's come over here, turn the heat on. And this should cause that to go on. Yep, went on. So let's come back over here. Yeah, it was over 10 amps. And now you can see the solar is coming on. Let's see if I can back out so you can see this. And we're up to 700 watts on the solar. And we're down to about drawing between 8 and 9 amps from the grid, if I'm reading that right. Yep, 8.4. So now at 700, when I shut that heater off, we should see that go off. Yes, shut off. Just the fans running on the heater. So you can see that now solar is off. And we're back down to that. So it works that way. So let's see if we can take it down just a little bit slower. So let's go get it back on. Turn back on. I'm going to turn this on low. And solar's going up. And this is starting to stabilize out. So we have about 7.5 amps coming from the solar. We have about 7 amps coming from the grid. Oh, just kicked out. Let's try that again. Okay, back on. So solar's coming up. Oh, kicked out. See, now it's starting a short cycle. Let's leave this on high. Thought I could get away with it turning on low, but I have all 3 on now because we have clouds going over, and with just the small solar array on, it wasn't working too good. So there we got 7 amps coming from solar and 11 from the grid. 12 from the grid. So let's shut off shop light. That dropped it down to 4.6. So 9.7. Let's shut off another shop light. Oops, wrong one. Let's shut off this one. Yep, turned off. So it is reliable if you set this to around between 5 and 6 amps. With this diode in here, it seems like it's a little bit more reliable with the closer you get to 5 amps. I was standing, as soon as you get below 5 amps, it's like a 50-50 shot. And as soon as you get down to like the lower amps, like 1 or 2 amps, it just don't shut off. So it is working, just not as well as I had hoped. But it still functions. I mean, for somebody who's looking to not short cycle, you know, if you have one of these inverters that puts out 10 amps and you know, because you're running it wide open and you have something that draws 15 amps that you want to use, it will work for that, you know, where when it kicks on, it'll turn on at 14 amps, just like we had this set at 14 amps. It will turn on and it will shut off when it gets down to 6 amps, but it will stay running, you know, as your solar power fires up and it brings down the draw from the grid. It did stay running. So it will work. It doesn't work as well as I hoped. So I also ordered some of these simple on-off relays. Let me move this out of the way. And yes, this panel is live. Don't play in your panel with live wires. That's a disclaimer. And you can see the light is on. It is opened right now. I set this to 10 amps to turn on. Now what I did to demonstrate this to you is I ran, because you can run 2 wires through here. And I know some of you are saying, you already know what I did here, because I have both phases on here because I'm using this breaker and this breaker. I just want to show you something, because if you choose this breaker and this breaker, and if one of these starts drawing 10 amps, it will go on. But I want to show you what happens if you do that, this, where you do a breaker from each phase. Let me put this back on. And I'm going to put this around both those wires. So you can see we are drawing zero amps right now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back over here. And what I have is I have this heat gun plugged into that outlet, and this heater is plugged into that outlet. 2 different legs, L1, L2, back in the breaker box. So let's turn this one on. Just turn on medium. And we're drawing 6.5. Well, let's make that trip, okay, because I have it set at 10. So let's turn this on high. And I heard it click. Well, oh, let me turn that off because we don't want our solar kicking on. Still had that one hooked up. So now you can see we're drawing 10.7 and the relay is closed. The red light is on. So if I had this put in, I mean, this is just here right now. I don't have it hooked up because I just want to show you something. So we're drawing 10 amps coming in. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to turn this one on. Now we're only drawing 1.3 amps. We have 2 things running. We have both heaters running. One heater on this leg and one heater on this leg. You can see this open because it's only seeing 1.3 amps. That's because these are out of phase of each other. So keep that in mind if you're going to do something where you're using 2 wires. Here, let me shut these noisy heaters off. See, if we just turn that one back off, and we're up at 9.8. So, and yeah, that heater's actually on low now. I moved that down. So, yes, so that works. 2 wires in here will work, but they have to be on the same phase. You know, they would have to be either both on there or both on there. You can't have, like right now, one of these has come from L1, one's come from L2. So they're out of phase of each other. So this and your CTs don't understand that. One phase will cancel out the other phase. So this will work, and you can put 2 wires, same phase. If I use this breaker and that breaker, it would work. So keep that in mind when you use these things. And I'm going to be doing some more, seeing how low I can go with these as far as with my inverters before I install them in the main panel. So I'm going to be doing some more troubleshooting over here on these. No, I shouldn't say troubleshooting, just more experimenting with them. And just I want to make sure before I put this stuff in my panel and say, yeah, I'm good to go, I want to make sure they're reliable and they work. I don't want to start backfeeding our grid. And maybe what I should have showed was, here's the fluke. That's around both them wires. It's showing 1.2. If I go around one, it's showing 9.8 and 10.6 around if you go around individual, but if you go around both, it's only showing 1.3. So once again, I just want to demonstrate that. Not everybody knows that, so keep that in mind if you're going to be using some sort of limiting device on your inverters.